thoughts on using some of the local kit home companies for new construction? Will a kit home be a problem with permitting? So let's just qualify this so we can have, let's just scope our discussion here. We're talking about a local kit home company. So local company, local kit, how does that work? Will it be a problem with permitting? Why don't we do this? Why don't we kind of, let's see. Let's do a counter. How do we do it last time? Let's do clockwise. Dylan, Scott, and Heidi. Go, Dylan.
We see a lot of this.
Let's mix it up. Let's go with Scott first, and then because Scott's in the middle of the clock, so Scott never goes first. So let's have Scott go first, and then we'll have Dylan, and then we'll have Heidi. Go, Scott.
I love this one. So there are material houses like HPM, for example, that has kit homes, and they've been doing them forever. And the interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize is you have a couple of different floor plans that you can choose from, and those plans have already been approved by Department of Planning and Permitting. So if you don't do any modifications to it, you have a very streamlined, simple permitting process through DPP, and you can actually get moving on that a lot faster. Obviously, the cons are.
I shouldn't just from it. Those are bird sounds, right? Just want to have it, yeah. Those are that's not like nails on a chalkboard. That's actually a bird. Sorry, Scott. Go ahead.
The cons are you're limited to what your options are. The cons are also if you make modifications, you still get a little bit of a streamlined process, but obviously DPP has to review that at this point.
Man, that's a hell of a bird back there, man. That ain't no coqui frog. That ain't that's not that ain't no. Listen to that thing.
That's why I come here.
You gotta love that, man. You gotta love that. That's almost like there's like a is that like a an ambulance kind of driving by? That's kind of what it almost sounds like.
He doesn't like what I'm saying, probably.
I don't agree. But Auntie Joyce says great feature on that guest suite. Yeah, that's an excellent one. All right, why don't we mute Scott and then let's go to thank you. Love the bird. I'm sure it's great when you're there. I'm sure it's great when you're in person. Dylan, unmute and fill us in on what the question on that kit home.
Yeah, you definitely want to do some due diligence on where the kit home is coming from, because like Scott said, you do have these established companies, HPM, Hansador, that have been doing this for years, and they have pre-approved plans, they're architect stamped. They have contractor partners that they'll refer you to that are familiar with building these. So it can be a very good option. But, just like overestimating guests, people always want to customize it, right? They want to get a kit home and then customize it and want to reap the benefits, but then they want to change stuff. So that's something that you kind of got to think about is, are you going to do that? Because you're going to give away some of the benefit of going with a package home, versus doing a custom home. But there's definitely a lot of advantages, and it happens all the time here. One of the things that you got to take into account is where you plan to build that home, because if it's in a neighborhood with an HOA and CCNRs, there may be specific restrictions, building guidelines, material guidelines, different things like that you want to sync up. So you don't want to kind of assume that you can do it and then buy a lot where you're going to have some conflicting regulations. So you're not going to have any issues with the county per se, because all of that stuff is built to code and designed, up to current standards. But you do have CCNRs that can be weird sometimes, height restrictions.
And CCNR stands for
covenants, codes, and restrictions.
Covenants, codes, and restrictions. Okay.
So you have some neighborhoods where, they require a certain kind of siding because they want the homes to have a certain look. They have a certain kind of roof material because they want the homes to have a certain kind of look. So sometimes there's a minimum square footage requirement. You got to do 2,000 square feet. So you definitely want to look a little bit deeper, where you're going to buy the land at to build the home, and then figure out and make sure that it all works.
So what kind of before we get to Heidi, what kind of an expert would you need to have on your team? I'm assuming if you're going to buy the land, whatever land that you can buy, you want to buy it with a realtor who knows what they're doing, because you guys would know those CCNRs, and you'd be able to say, look, nice kit home, but it can or cannot work because even though the kit home is approved, the location you're looking at putting it may not work. So that's that first part. But what about, like, let's say that it's okay, then what? I mean, because you're not going to go to yourself and buy the kit and start hammering, right? Would you get like a project, like an architect to kind of run the whole who would you get to run the whole thing? How would that work?
The first safest step is because you can have conceptual designs and everything ready to go, is take that to the HOA and get them to approve it. Most HOAs will have a design review committee.
And
that
HOA stands for Homeowners
Homeowners
Association.
Association.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So that's the thing, right? With all rules, laws, regulations, humans enforce it, right? And so you could read something and say, hey, this is the way I interpret it. But then a group of people who sit on the HOA board that actually have to approve it, read it a different way. So that's the safest thing to do, is to put it as a contingency in your contract that, the HOA design and review committee has to give you preliminary approval for the plans on what you want to do before you'll close. So that's the quickest, or the most for sure way. But yeah, you can definitely get an architect involved, a real estate attorney involved. You can go, down a deep rabbit hole with this. But at the end of the day, the HOA is going to have to approve whatever you're going to do if they have those restrictions.
Well, I tell you one thing, you definitely want to have, at the very, very least, a realtor like one of you guys to kind of guide through, because there's such a maze. This
is no longer an issue, I mean, especially in our market, right? But for years and years and years pre-COVID, we had these really nice neighborhoods that were built, subdivided and built, gated, some of them gated, 1 acre lots, and they were cheap, $300,000, $275,000, and people would always inquire and be like, wow, this is such a great deal. I can get an acre with a great view. And the reason that these sat on the market for a long time and never sold was those neighborhoods had very strict design and build guidelines, which made you build a house that was so expensive that a lot of time it priced people out. So even if you could get the lot for $300,000, if now you had to spend, $800,000-$900,000 on build because of the materials that you had to use and the size of the square footage and different things like that, you couldn't, people would assume, I can buy the lot for $300 and build for $300, and now I got a $600,000 property, and that wasn't the case. And so that's no longer a problem. Everything is pretty much sold in those areas now. But for years and years and years, that was a big downside to those types of communities, where they wanted the community to be upscale, but it hurt the value of the land because there wasn't as many people who wanted to buy and build that upscale house.
But no longer. That was then, and this is now. And as we said, we're not talking about the price that we're talking about now. Heidi, what's your sense of local kit homes? And you have anything? What would you like to add to the kit home issue? Is there anything specific about Maui that you have to think about? Are there considerations? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I would be really skeptical that any HOA community would allow a kit home. So if that's something that you're planning on doing, I would want to, look into that and see that could be approved in advance. There are kit homes on Maui. I've seen people do FabMac homes and other kit homes, and some of them are really nice. The considerations are the same with any other type of building project. If you're looking at land, where are the utilities coming from? You're going to need to be able to connect to utilities. Also, does the site need any kind of preparation prior to just plopping down a house there? Those are some of the same considerations you'd be looking into in any building project.
Well, I think one of the things I've heard you folks say, many, many, many times over and over and over again is that, the kid home or the that kind of stuff is all well and good, but it's so much cleaner if you can buy an existing home and on an existing property. That's so much of a cleaner way to kind of go. Better to take that and kind of do renovations or research the renovation on that than to kind of start with something. There's very little, kind of raw land these days that's buildable or easily buildable or not, not complex, etc. So that's part of what I'm kind of hearing here as well.
And Scott could speak to this more intelligently, but from a financing standpoint, you got to have a lot more cash available, and you got to be in a much better financed position. You're not going to do this whole thing, buy land and buy a kid house with 10% down, right? You got to have some reserves available. There's deposits that's got to be made. There's a lot that goes into it. And so you got to be in a different type of financial position than just buying a home where you can get a mortgage and, 5% down mortgage or 20%, even a 20% down mortgage.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I've actually been down this path a lot, significantly. Not only so, part of my thing is I've tired on the fact that there's basically two local material houses that, as Dylan said, Hunsador and HPM, and they provided the same type of house for 20 years, 30 years. And so I get tired of seeing the same old inventory. It's a great way to go because the idea is to streamline the process and streamline the permitting, the time frame, and to make things easier and to reduce cost overruns, unexpected cost overruns that come with doing custom homes. So now you do have to get all your materials bought from that material house company. If you're going through them, they do provide you, if you want to customize it, they have provide you with either the architect or some kind of engineer to help do those modifications. Me and a buddy of mine started looking into this. We were actually going to have, I actually went to HPM's plant over in Hilo and looked at their assembly portion, because you can actually get your entire walls put together here in the islands. And so when it gets delivered to the property, you're basically just standing up the walls for your framing. But we were also looking at doing different designs and bringing them into the islands so that we could have some more variety here, and potentially, offering that as a package and stuff. So there are pros to it. And there's also cons, but you're also limited to your options right now, unless you're going out of state. And then, okay, now you're adding the level of complexity. We even looked at delivering some of these portions of these homes in by container. And one of the things you got to be careful of when you're doing these walls, wherever you're doing them, and you're just going to stand them up, if your contractor's off by a little bit, okay, now you're re-engineering that whole wall panel that's been built and stuff. So anyway, that's kind of a long story, but yeah, it's an option.
Yep. Good stuff. Let's catch up on our comments before we kind of flip back. We have a couple of questions that are tied into this topic here. So Barbara says, are there many or any kit houses on Ocean View Estate where it's quite inexpensive? Dylan, quick answer on that one.
Yes, that is a place where this happens very often. You can get a piece of land for 15 grand, and then you can build. There's no restrictions on what you can build on it, and people do build kit homes there all the time. Very
Great,
common.
thanks. Great. So Barbara, reach out to us. There's if you haven't already, if you're not, I don't know if Barbara, if you're on the newsletter, then just hit reply. But if you're not, click on the links in the description. Get a hold of us. Get a hold of Dylan to kind of help. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The downside is there's not a lot of contractors that want to go out there to build it. So you might pay a premium for the work to get done, because it's an hour and a half away from where most of these carpenters are going to be living.
It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? Hawaiian Ocean View Estate is kind of in the middle of nowhere.